Okay, guys, I thought I was done talking about this, but I realized I have more to say. So, I've made a couple videos, I guess, addressing what I feel are some of the problems in. Ooh, I can't get y'all settled. There we go. That's really actually not a good angle. I'm just gonna put y'all down here. Anyways, I've addressed some of the issues I've seen in we see in the trans community, right? And I feel like this is one of the most ironic things that I feel like the feminist movement doesn't understand. So I know they created the term TERF for feminists who believe that the trans community shouldn't be included in the feminist movement. And it's kind of used as like a way to hate on women and say like, oh, you're not a good person because you separate women. And I feel like this is the most ironic part about it. The feminist movement supporting the trans community is the biggest crux to the feminist movement, and I'm going to explain why in this video. So I feel like as a former feminist, honestly, I don't know if I would ever classify myself as a feminist, but as someone who supports women but is not a feminist. Oh, Lecrae? Sorry, y'all. I'm also trying to upload some content while I do this. Kill two birds in one stone. Um, so basically, I took a women's studies class in college, right, as part of my sociology degree. And this is why I feel like some people don't realize I understand the sociological arguments that exist for Black people being victims, that exist for women being victims. I understand all of those things because that's exactly what I learned in college, taking the classes that I took. Sociology is literally the study of how social constructs affect people in the world. So I actually have a very good understanding of all of these things, and it's that understanding of those things that allows me to see the problems in a lot of these beliefs people hold and whatnot. So the first part of this is the first thing we learn in women's studies is basically that women are victims from birth on the basis of them being females, right? Not from identifying as women, but being a female. The feminist movement started on the basis of women being females. And one of the things I learned in the women's studies class is that a baby that was a girl, a female babies in the womb in China was like 2 times as likely, or I can't remember how much it was, but it was like they were at least 2 times as likely to be aborted than a male in the womb. So female babies are more likely to be aborted in China, right? That was a thing because they prioritized males over females. So the feminist movement started on the basis of females are being discriminated against on the basis of sex. Not gender, but biological sex. And you can see that in a lot of ways. There was other things I learned, like all of I can't remember what it was called. It was like female mutilation rituals that were happening in some countries, in some Islamic countries, females are allowed to be beaten and it's not looked down upon. Like, females are treated truly as second-class citizens. And this is not on the basis of gender, but on the basis of sex. Like, being a female, being a woman made someone more likely to experience abuse, more likely to be aborted, have to deal with, genital mutilation. So these are very real issues I learned in my women's studies class, right? And that was all on the basis of female, being a woman, a biological, I hate even having to say biological woman, because when I say woman, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I don't understand like this whole confusion on we don't know how to just define woman anymore. This is what I've always pointed out and I've always understood. The including trans and the feminist movement is going to negatively impact women and only women. The reason for this is it's actually like, this is the most ironic thing, is that the trans community is never going to negatively impact men. It doesn't even come close to having any negative impacts on men as a whole. It only negatively impacts women. Always. It will only ever negatively impact women. And I pointed this out a long time ago and I got hated on. People hated on me for it, but they were hating on me for telling the truth about it, because I could see like this idea does not it dismantling what a woman is in order to include men is not beneficial to women. It's not beneficial to women. And basically, for the women that are called TERFs, for believing, that we should still consider women based off of their biology and not include trans women as part of the feminist issue, because females face different and women face different issues than trans women face. I believe, yes, there you can say there's some overlap, and I feel like the issue, trans women have issues that only trans women face and experience that are different from issues that women face and women don't experience. And including trans issues as being women's issues, I feel like is not really actually doing anything for women, because issues that affect trans women only are not really, don't apply to women at all. I feel like they have two different experiences. We have different experiences in this world, and it's okay to recognize that the trans person's experience is not the same as a woman's experience, and I don't understand why people take issue with that. I feel like trans rights are not the same as women's rights. Someone's right to be trans is not the same as, what woman and the feminist movement initially was fighting for, the equal treatment of women and men. And it wasn't woman based off of people identifying as women. It was women based off of them being born biologically female. So these two things are kind of counterintuitive to each other in a lot of ways, because as I stated in the beginning, one of the first things I learned in my women's studies class is that women are discriminated against on the basis of their sex, their biological sex. Not that they identify as women, but from their biology. Women are seen as less than on the basis of their biology. And, a female in the womb that's being aborted because they're female, that's not how they identify. That's their biology that they're being discriminated against. So I personally don't understand why some people have the issue with saying women's rights are different from trans rights. But the difference, or the thing that I've come to understand, is that sometimes, or I shouldn't even say sometimes, a lot of the times, trans rights being included as women's rights go against women, negatively impacts women. The biggest one we can say is putting trans women in women's sports. That is maybe the most obvious disparaging impact that including trans women in the women's sports, we can see how that negatively impacts women. Not women who, not on the basis of identity, on the basis of biology. because this whole idea that, identifying a man identifying as a woman, making them equal to or having the exact same structure as female. I don't even know. It's just like, it's madness. It's madness that you even have to speak like this or argue this, because I feel like it should be the most common sense thing that biological males are not the same as biological females. It doesn't matter how someone identifies. These two things are different. If they weren't different, we wouldn't have the term woman and man to begin with. There's clear differences between a man and a woman, not just from a biological stance, but from in every other sense of the word. Yes, we're all human beings. Yes, we all, there's more similarities than differences, but there's enough differences that we differentiate men from women for a very specific reason. So we know biological males typically have more strength than women. This is almost across the bar. Yes, are there some very strong women who can outpower some of the weaker men? Yes. But if you literally just look at, even if for the past 50 freaking plus years of sports, men always outperform the woman. Biological men always outperform the woman. There are some women that compete with men, they don't stand a chance competing with men. When you look at the Olympics and see how males compete and their scores and their times, they're always significantly faster. They can lift significantly more than a woman can. And for people to claim that you can just ignore biology when it comes to sports and say a trans woman can equally compete with trans woman competing with women in sports and ignoring biological factors, to me, is just, it doesn't make sense. I feel like it's dumb. I personally think trans women, I'm not saying trans women can't exist or shouldn't exist, but why don't they fight for their own space instead of basically inserting themselves into women's spaces? And then it's negatively impacting women, because now, women who are competing against biological male identifying women, trans woman, I guess, is the best. I mean, it's the best way to say it, but sometimes I just feel like I just have to be very specific and technical with my language so people understand what the actual issue is. A trans woman is a biological male that identifies as a woman. Anyways, women competing with trans women are not an equal footing, and this whole BS about testosterone levels changing biological advantages that are embedded into a man's DNA, no amount of hormones takes that away, because their body is always going to produce a natural amount of testosterone that is higher than most females will ever produce. Now, there are some females that have higher amounts of testosterone naturally. They're not biological men though, right? So it's like women who do have biological advantages as women because they naturally produce slightly more testosterone is not the same as a biological male that always naturally produces higher levels of testosterone competing against women in sports. And some people have made that argument like it's no different. It is different. One is just like, it's always going to be true. It's not always going to be true that a woman has high amounts of testosterone. Anyways, I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons a lot of people, and when I make that video, like, why people stop supporting it, this is one of the reasons. People are tired of seeing biological men dominating biological women in these sports because their identity as a woman makes them feel like they're entitled to compete in women's sports. And especially when they're trans women that have competed as men most of their life, now forcing their way into the women's feels. It's so counterintuitive to it. And that's a big reason people don't want to support it anymore, because they're like, look, this is hurting biological women, and anyone who points that out is told they're a bigot. Oh, you're hateful. Oh, you're these, for pointing out common sense things, that it's not fair to actual women to have men who've competed as men for majority of their lives suddenly say they identify as women and then compete against women and then dominate them in these sports, because men like an athletic man at their top height is always going to be way stronger, way faster than a woman at their best level, because there's literal obvious biological differences between men and women. It's like people just don't, I don't know, it makes me angry honestly talking about it. So that's one instance of it too, right? And then let's talk about the having safe spaces for just women and why people see that as an issue. And some people are taking issue with women wanting women or female only spaces. You know, at one point, women were probably fighting for safe spaces for only women, but now you have this extreme take feminist movement fighting for, they care more about the rights of trans women than they care about the rights of women at this point. You are prioritizing biological males who identify as women over female born women. Why are we catering to the feelings, more to the feelings of trans women and trans men even? And I feel like it's like both. And I feel like this is something that I've observed in actual comment sections, in some people's opinions. You know, trans men and non-binary people frequently it's like the language that's affected is always the woman. It's always women who are negatively impacted by these things. And it's almost like, I feel like from a spiritual perspective, it's almost like this whole entire trans movement was a way to disenfranchise women in a sense. Like, because why are we changing the word mother and the word father, but not changing the word father? It's like we're only taking away things that are more female centered. It's like men are not being affected by the trans movement at all. Men's spaces are not being affected. Men's spaces are not at risk. Men's sports are not at risk, right? It's only women who are experiencing all the negative impacts, and then the women who are crying out about this and saying like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this because, you know, a lot of women are losing out, are being told they're just hateful bigots for fighting for, you know, biological women's rights now. It's like, it's the most anti-woman thing that you can actually see happening right now within, you know, the very these very extreme kind of trans supporting ideologies. It's like prioritizing trans women over women. And I feel like why would that make sense? Why would it make sense for the women's right movement to now prioritize trans identifying people's I guess issues over women's issues? It's counterintuitive to what is supposed to be supporting women, right? And now most people can't even define woman anymore. We can't define woman. A woman is a person who identifies as a woman. Erasing all of the biological things associated with women to just, you know, and it's like the inseminated person's term. Like, there's so many reasons a lot of women are angry about this. And I feel like this is going to be the collapse of the feminist movement. I honestly believe the feminist movement, including trans issues as part of women's issues, is going to collapse the feminist movement. And a lot of women are going to leave it because they're going to see this insanity. They're going to recognize, hey, the feminist movement is actually not even doing anything that is benefiting women or helping women or supporting women. They're actually supporting more trans issues and trans ideologies than they are actually supporting, issues that affect women on the basis of their biology, right? And we're also taking away so many of the um ways that biological women, you know, consider themselves women, being mothers, being moms. You want to take away breastfeeding and call it chest feeding. You want to take away, mother and say the inseminated person. It's like, it's literally making women more male dominated. That's actually what's happening. It's like, the more the more you cater to biological males identifying as women's feelings over actual women's feelings, you're actually turning women into more male-centered things than they actually were before. Because inseminated persons, to call a mother an inseminated person is actually just insane. Or even to call them a birthing person. It's like taking away all of this language associated with female things. We're erasing those in order to prioritize biological males. The reason this is happening is because a biological male who identifies as a woman does not like anything that is distinctly female oriented. Do y'all realize that? Trans women existing as women are not on the basis of being female. So they literally are attacking anything that is solely associated with females in order to make trans women more comfortable in women's spaces. We're erasing anything that is distinctly female in order to prioritize trans women in women's spaces. This is why women are negatively impacted by it. You're erasing anything associated with with biological women or with being female. You're erasing that from being tied to being a woman. It's the erasure of woman, actually, because like I said, the original feminist movement is on the basis of sex, which is on the basis of being a female, being born female. And now you have to include the trans woman in that. You're erasing the basis that the whole entire feminist movement was created on. That's why I'm like, it's the biggest crux, it's the biggest irony, is erasing anything female in order to support trans women. Anything associated but with biological women is being erased or being changed in order to make trans women feel more welcome in women's spaces. And that's what I'm saying. Including trans women in the women's movement almost ensured that the erasure of women. That's what it is. It's literally, this is why it's happening. A trans woman does not have any understanding of a woman on the basis of biology, right? And it's like, if my identity as a woman is built around my biology, it's not built around how I feel, what I think. It's just built around, I was born a woman, or I'm female, so I'm a woman, right? And then someone who's not those things is saying, well, I'm a woman too, but because I know I'm not a woman on the basis of actual biology, but I still want to be included in anything associated with you, let's just ignore all of the biological aspects of women and pretend we're the exact same. And so that's what's happening. That's why you have men who biological males competing against women in sports, because we're pretending biology doesn't matter. We're pretending female and male don't exist. It's just however you choose to identify. And this is the problem. That is the actual problem. Because most women's identity as women is based off of how they were born. It's based off of their biology. They're saying, hey, look, you're actually erasing just females. You're erasing being a female. You're erasing anything slightly associated with a female's biology. That's the most misogynistic thing you can do. You're including misogyny now in the women's movement. erasing anything that is tied to being a female in order to make biological males more comfortable in how they identify. It is so counterintuitive. But I understood this the first time because I'm just like, isn't the entire feminist movement based on the fact that people are female, and now you're including people who aren't born female as women? I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This is going to be a problem. I said this years ago, and now we see it happening. So anyways, I feel like me saying this, and again, if you don't agree, that's fine. I don't hate you. I am not thinking less. I don't think less of a trans person or think less of trans women. I just really believe common sense tells me that biological males are always going to be different from biological females, and that we should not erase biological sex in order to make, you know, to make trans identifying people more comfortable in spaces, you know, erasing anything distinctly feminine, meaning associated with female only, erasing all of those things, all of this language, all of this words in order to make, you know, a non-binary person or a trans person feel better about themselves at the expense of women. It's at the expense of women. All of these things are at the expense of women. That's why people aren't supporting it anymore, because we're realizing, like, hey, you know, I wanted to support this, and I want to support people, you know, doing, you know, whatever, but it shouldn't come at the expense of how I view myself and how women compete in sports and how women do all these things. Why is it always negatively impacting women? And it doesn't touch men at all. It doesn't touch men. And something someone said before is like trans. This is just, I thought it was funny. They said before a man transitions into a biological, or when a biological man transitions into a woman, they bring the male privilege with them. That's what someone said. Now, male privilege and the whole idea of what's it called? Patriarchy and all of these things, those are terms highly associated with feminism, right? The patriarchy and this, you're born with this male privilege. And I honestly think you can honestly see how that actually is kind of what's happening, because trans women being the loudest voice in the rooms when there's, you know, some trans woman and women involved, and how trans women are representing there's more trans women representing women's spaces than actual women. You know, like having trans women competing in women's sports and taking these titles and getting all this attention. It's like all of those things are just, what does it do? Instead of actually adding, you know, well, it's not adding to women, it's taking away from women, right? You're not adding this, like a trans woman getting something or winning his title, that's not doing something for women, that's doing something for the trans community, right? That's making the trans community feel good about themselves. Oh yeah, a trans woman is in this space, or a trans woman's on that cover. That's not a win for women. I feel like people who believe it's a win for women are people who prioritize the trans community over the, like, you prioritize trans over women. And like I said, they're not one and the same. I feel like you can support trans women having their spaces, trans women being able to compete in sport, trans women having those things, and still say, you know, it shouldn't come at the expense of women, right? Because if we can have a trans woman be in their space and women have their spaces, it's like you can support each other however you want. But to pretend like a trans woman being something or winning something represents women, I feel like it's just a lie. It is honestly a lie. I don't have the same experience as a trans woman. I will never have the same experience as a trans woman. And a trans woman will never, I shouldn't even just say trans woman, but a trans person does not have the same experience as a woman. I feel like that's whether you're a trans man or a trans woman. You know, a trans man is someone biologically female, right? But it's almost like even for a trans man, they hate anything female about themselves. They reject anything feminine about themselves. So they don't want to talk about periods. They don't want to talk about giving birth. Like, they're the ones who are often requesting the erasure of, you know, being wanting to be called birthing persons, wanting to say chest feed, because they reject anything distinctively female about themselves in order to identify as men. So it's like, whether it's a trans man or a trans woman, both of these things negatively take away from anything distinctly female, because each side of that coin, trans woman, trans man, is against anything distinctly female or feminine. They don't want to include anything distinctly female in their language. That's what's happening. This is me saying this objectively, not because I'm trying to persuade someone or change someone. Like, this is objectively what is happening in the world right now. If someone is a trans woman on the basis of their identity or gender, not their biology, they don't have an understanding of being a woman from anything biological. They don't have periods, they don't give birth, they can't get pregnant, they don't have a uterus. Like, all of these things are distinctly female. They don't have any experience with those things. So they reject anything female, distinctly feminine or female, in order to claim their identity as a woman. And then a trans man rejects anything distinctly female in order to, make their identity more as a male. Well, men don't have uteruses. Oh wait, I guess they do now, because they're trans man, and a trans man is actually a man. And when we say stuff like that, all it does is just like, it's honestly just creates all this confusion in the world. It really does. And it was way easier if when people stopped pretending to be something and just, said, hey, I'm a man because I was born a male, and I'm a woman because I was born a female. Eh, my honest take on the thing is, I think gender is dumb. I feel like I feel like the social construct of gender is created right, but I feel like for a trans person, it's actually not fluid, because they're saying, wearing a dress makes you a woman. But, if we're trying to get away from gender and gender stereotypes, then we should say, well, wearing a dress, anybody can wear a dress, whether you're a man or a woman, and wearing a dress isn't associated with one gender or the other. It's like, the difference is like, a trans person is almost creating their entire identity around a gender stereotype and ignoring biology. And then it's like someone who's like, well, we should just focus on biology to as how you identify, because you can't change that. But if someone wants to wear a dress regardless of their biology, like, so be it. And that's gender fluidity, right? I don't know. Everything about this whole situation, I feel like, is just insane and nonsensical in a lot of ways. But yeah, my main point is just that a lot of the trans issues um, negate or take away from women's issues and women's right almost at every point, because the trans community is against anything that is distinctly female. So that's the issue. That's the underlying issue of all of this. And I feel like I'm not even a feminist, and I can see that. But there's people who are feminists that blindly, just say, oh, well, I just support whatever and do whatever. And I really think it's like the ironic thing is that the most feminist leaning women are now prioritizing biological males' feelings over females. It's like, I support women, but you actually support more men than you do women. It's honestly just like, I honestly see it as supporting, including trans issues and women's issues is just so counterintuitive to the entire feminist movement, because if the feminist movement was built on the basis of biological sex, then how can you now support biological men in women's issues? It's like it negates everything the feminist movement was technically built on. And anyways, like I said, I just honestly feel like a trans person has a different experience and different problems than those that women face. At least if we're talking about the biological issues associated with women. But now those are being erased, you know? We can't even talk about anything biological associated with only women, or a trans woman now feels excluded, or a trans man says, "Hey, I have those issues too and I'm not a woman, I'm a man." It's just like it's literally just insanity. It's insanity. And I feel like common sense, me being a very logical, objective person, is why I can't support things that are illogical. My hair looks crazy. It's like the logical part of my brain that, like, I have to understand the world in objective ways to make sense of it. Like, I can't hold things that contradict them, hold opinions that contradict themselves. And I feel like that's why I see the issue as being like, you can't include trans rights in women's rights, because I feel like they represent two different things. And I feel like that's an objective stance I can hold that is not, taking away from women or taking away from the trans community. It's literally saying, look, these communities might have some issues that can overlap, but at the basis, at the root, we have different experiences, different issues, and different problems within our communities. And therefore, I don't think it's wrong to say the trans rights and trans issues are separate from women's rights and women's issues. Objectively, right? Because objectively, there's differences between a biological male and a biological female. And a trans woman is still technically always a biological male. A trans man is a biological female, right? But they reject anything that has to do with their biology in order to live their lives the way they identify as men. So it's like, even trans men will sometimes actively go against biological females' rights. I don't know, because it's like they don't want to be a part of, they don't see themselves as women. They see themselves as men. But then, you know why men, I feel like the reason men aren't even bothered by trans men existing is because it's just like, I said that in the other video. I don't think men will ever see biological women as a threat to them. And it's like a biological female or a trans man, a lot of men still recognize like the femininity of them, and so they don't see them as a threat. They've never been a threat. Like, women have almost never been a threat to men. You can't say the opposite, though, is true. It's like so much of the feminist movement was built around biological males being a threat to women and the patriarchy and male privilege and all of these other things, and you're just literally dismantling that, each one of those points, each one of those things, every time you prioritize, I guess, trans rights and trans issues in women's spaces over women's rights or over women's desires. I don't know. Like I said, I just see it as being the biggest honestly, it's like it's basically single-handedly going to dismantle, in my opinion, the feminist movement. If you are someone who's still a feminist, which I honestly think a lot of people are leaving the feminist movement because of how the feminist movement is now prioritizing trans issues over women. And yeah, just seeing how like the feminist movement doesn't even care about women anymore. They care more about trans women and trans issues than they actually care about women. And they care more about defending the rights of biological males existing in women's spaces than the safety of women. And sometimes even the safety of children. I feel like all of it is counterintuitive to me for the actual basis that the feminist movement was built on. And like I said, after taking my women's studies class, I said this is an issue. If the claim of the feminist movement is that women are discriminated against on the basis of sex, how then can we ignore biological sex and in supporting trans women whose identity as trans is not built as woman, is not built around their biological sex? That was always what I saw as the issue. Anyways, that's all I have to say.